Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
It's certainly
Yeah, it's certainly like- If I wasn't right the first time, I got a second chance to do it. So welcome to the first town hall. Those of you, 35 you or more out on the Zoom and the 20+ here, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I'm Terry Shell. I'm your new Chief Development Officer. This is the first of 3 town halls that we're going to try this spring and hopefully then take into the fall to keep conversations going. Each one of these town halls will be a little bit different, and so my town hall experience is one of a little bit of information and then lots of dialogue back and forth. We've got some great questions from you, and we're going to try to answer those and have conversation back and forth during this time together. I've got with me today Jackie and Justin and Art and myself, and we're going to do our best to bring you on the journey. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Justin. And
we'll try this round 2. Sorry for those of you that are on Zoom. My jokes were funnier the first time. But, so basically, just a recap of what we briefly talked about. A lot of questions have come up, and these town halls were designed because, as I had said, in pre-COVID times, we used to get together 3 to 4 times a year, and we'd have 100, 200 stewards get together, and we'd be able to take people on the journey of the Conservancy. And over the 2 years of COVID, we had substantial and rapid growth. But because we weren't getting together, we couldn't take anybody on the journey. And we're very fortunate as an organization. COVID brought what was estimated to be about a 40% closure rate of nonprofits. It's approaching closer to 60% of nonprofits didn't survive COVID. So not only did we survive, we thrived. Our organization grew exponentially because we, in our staff as well as our stewards, are amazing innovators. We pivoted the organization. The stewards got together, and the same with our team, and said, how can we reimagine the Conservancy in a world where it just isn't about one place? And that's how we've had such amazing growth. I've had people ask the question of, what's with the new office? It's so big, how come we needed a big office? How come we have so many staff? Where did they come on? Just where have we gone? And a lot of that was that pivot and that strategic growth that we started 4 years ago and continue today. As we look at the new office space here, a lot of people have asked the question of how come we have more spaces than we do people? And that was specific and intentional. It was because we wanted to build a collaborative space. When we looked at the steward organization and the staff that are here to support the organization, we didn't look at an opportunity to bring staff in to manage our volunteer organization. We didn't bring staff in order to lead all of the steward initiatives. We have so many brilliant and amazing stewards that we brought these staff members in to collaborate and complement our steward population. So a lot of people have had the questions of, why are some staff working on certain specific issues with or without stewards, and why are stewards working on other programs or issues without staff? And that's because of the powerhouse we have in our stewards. Because we have such highly intelligent, motivated, and critical thinking volunteers, we aren't a typical nonprofit. We don't need staff to manage every single activity. Our core leadership team, which we're fortunate that Art is leading for the next 2 years, extends our team exponentially. One of the things that comes out of the City of Scottsdale audit every single year is the amount of hours and skills that our stewards contribute. When I came on board, and I know Paul had struggles with it, our organization had struggles with it before when we do our financial statements, because we use skilled volunteer hourly rates. People say, what does that mean? And that means that our volunteers are skilled in the trade in which they're doing. At my previous organization, our volunteers, much like many nonprofits, were, here, pass out this widget, or direct people over to that doorway. Because we have skilled volunteers, that's why you'll see in our annual report, our over 700 volunteers equal over 50 full-time staff. So when we look at an organization, and a lot of people see a team of 16 here, that's not how I look at it. I see a team of 66 full-time people because of the 50 full-time people that our volunteers make and the 16 that we have here. So in this space, there are desks where stewards can come in and have a workplace, where we can have researchers and interns from the universities come in and have a workspace so that we can complement the amazing programs that we do. When we look at this fun truck that has come up in recent conversations and questions, a lot of people say, wait, I didn't know we needed a truck. Why were we looking at a truck? And we have an amazing partner in Sanderson Ford. They approached us and said, we want to make a substantial contribution towards the purchase of this to support your mission. But we need you to meet us part of the way. And we met and said, you know what? We've got staff and stewards pretty much 5 days a week heading to schools, heading to research sites around the preserve and regional areas. We've got a lot of people putting a lot of miles, and thank goodness a lot of people have SUVs and trucks, but what about the people that don't? And we told Sanderson it wasn't in our priority for this year, but that the financial contribution they made towards the purchase of that made it too good to pass. So we ended up getting it used. We didn't go fancy, top of the line, but we're really hoping that this will build out a relationship with Sanderson Ford, because they are known across the valley and the state for once they have a relationship fully donating vehicles with no cost to nonprofits. So as we continue to grow in the years to come, it's a partnership we didn't want to pass on. When we look at the meeting space in here too, it was designed so we have the resources for stewards and staff to work. I remember my first year here, and I sat down with the core leadership team and I said, okay, the programs have never submitted budgets. Will you guys submit budgets for your programs? And I remember a couple program chairs saying, we don't have any needs. And I said, why is that? I said, because we just pay for it. And I said, for 27 years you have. It's time for the organization to take that burden on. So it was fun because I know construction and maintenance was like, we don't have anything. I'm like, what about the shovels? What about all these things? And I go, oh yeah, I guess we do have stuff, but we hadn't matured as an organization. So when we've looked at this about how can we become the organization that is also a business, many of you used to hear at steward events, I would say when I came in, I made the board one promise. I said, you have to work under the pretext that we are a business and a nonprofit. Because we can be a business without being a nonprofit, but we can't be a successful nonprofit without being a business. So that comes with providing the resources to your volunteers, providing the resources to your staff, providing the resources to your funders. A lot of the staff that we brought on was because of additional funding sources that needed specialist staff. I've got the great example in our 2 primary education staff. They came in because our education committee on the CLT identified that we needed to pivot to curriculum-based education. The teachers were really struggling connecting with our mission when it didn't meet their curriculum standards. So we brought in 2 specialists that specifically can write not only for current curriculum standards, but next generation science standards, which we're trying to get the state, and it's not in our mission, our education organization trying to get the state to fully adopt next generation standards. But for those of you that don't pay attention, it is the first massive curriculum update since the manufacturing era. If all of you remember, I know I remember when I was going to school, it was all about memorize this so that you can repeat it on a test. It was designed in a manufacturing economy. You were brought through school to memorize things and repeat because it was highly likely you'd be working in manufacturing where you wanted to memorize and repeat processes. The new standards are based on children and youth innovatively thinking, seeking to understand it, not giving them the answer, asking them to formulate the question. And that has the power to move us forward. With it, it also brings innovative thinkers. The next generation, if you've seen, has no interest in staying at one company for their whole life. It is scary. The Bureau of Labor Statistics released the 2020 statistics for the average business in the United States, and they had 58% turnover that year. The other thing that they're saying in the current generation, in the people entering the workforce or are in the workforce in their 20s and 30s, 33% of the people you hire will not be with you 12 months later. It's generational. It's what they're doing. People are coming into organizations to develop skills to then go somewhere else, especially in small organizations like ours. We're specifically pivoting so that we can help our staff members achieve what they want in their profession. We want them to stay with us and work within the organization, but if there isn't an opportunity, we want to help them find that opportunity. People have said, we see whether it's staff turning over, whether it's staff leaving or coming, what is that? That's been an intentional pivot we have made to meet the labor demand. When I grew up, I remember you wanted to be with a company for 20, 30 years. Had great retirement, you got a gold watch. I remember when I started with the Walt Disney Company. At my 5 years, I got a commemorative thing. That's not what this generation wants. This generation wants to achieve things quicker and faster so that they can, I can't believe I'm saying this because I never thought it'd be a possibility, so they can retire earlier. The amount of people I talk to that are retiring in their 40s and 50s, I'm not gonna be one of those people. That's what our generation is doing. One of the things that I did want to talk about is as we've grown, the organization has seen a shift. And it comes up a lot. I talk about it in Stewardship 101 for any of you that were there this year when we restarted them. When I came on board, the organization was in a really tough spot. Not only did we have a small budget, we had a $100,000 loan out. We were operating in the negative, and I am so incredibly grateful for someone in the room, Paul, who helped us, the organization, limp through that time of trouble. And I was brought in to transition the business to the next chapter of its life. So previously, we were heavily focused internally. We were, how do we take care of the preserve for the preserve? Now we've pivoted the organization of how do we take care of the preserve and surrounding area to benefit our city and our region. When people look at Scottsdale, we say we're the only one in the world that is set up like we are because this city has such a unique treasure. When you take the preserve and all of its open space throughout the city, a third of the city of Scottsdale is open space. It's crazy. So people have asked, why is our mission not just in the preserve like it used to be? Why are we doing work outside? And it's because we grew our responsibility to be able to help not only the city of Scottsdale, but the region advance. We always talk about the examples of if there are 10 nonprofits all working individually, their impact is one time per organization. But if we have 10 organizations working collaboratively, sharing data, that's as powerful as 20 to 30 organizations. So when we talk about it in S101, I give the greatest example of the 80-20 goal. We all know that one. Sometimes it gets confused with 20% of the people do 80% of the work. But it's based on 20% of your outputs are 80% of the other party's fulfillment or inclusion. So when we look at that, even in our own organization, 80% of the work we do is protecting and caring for the McDowell-Sonoran Preserve. We have shifted 20% of our work to be regional and outside for a couple of reasons. The biggest one, looking at business, is it's come out to about 80% of our revenue comes from the notoriety of that 20% of our work. Because we are relevant to so many more people because of the broader reach, it's staggering when you look at our budget. We did a 5-year study of our budget from 2017 up through 2022. And our budget has grown over seven times itself in that 5 years. Our budget has gone from a little bit over $400,000 to $3 million because of that look on regional work, of having an appeal to more people. So when we look at even the staff growth, if we look at back when we had that $425,000 budget, we had the equivalent of 7 full-time staff. We have 16 today. So to think the organization has grown 7 times itself, we haven't grown the staff 7 times itself, We've just a little bit more than doubled. So that's because of the stewards, because we bring in these specialist staff that can help us guide and direct the programs that are the most heavily funded, which are able to help us continue to do the work. We have these people in place. Now, the other thing that we looked at when we shifted our conversation regionally was a lot of our funders brought up the point of, oh my gosh, you're engaging the next generation. You're engaging youth. One of our donors specifically came up to me and said, the reason I have grown my support so much for the Conservancy is because I'm older and I'm not going to be here forever. And you guys have made a direct decision to bring the young people along. If you think our education, our formal education programs have grown from 500 youth to this year, we're going to impact 5,000 youth. Why is that also so amazing? Because the reality that I worry about quite often of protecting the preserve long past when I'm here. We all know it would take moving mountains to take it out of the city charter, but it could be someday. The city of Scottsdale's got 5,000 acres left in it that can be developed. And once that's gone, who's to say in 50 years, someone might not say, oh, 100 acres from this place. It's only 100 acres, it's 30,600. And if we're not here to stand up for it, what generation is? So we look at all of these areas in which we have grown, and we say, this is why we're growing our mission. This is why we're growing our impact. I met with the superintendent of Scottsdale Unified literally yesterday for coffee. And if you know it's hard enough for school districts to be able to financially support themselves, we're in conversations for them to become a funder of ours to support our education programs, because how much we're moving Scottsdale Unified School District. Just 4 years ago, we impacted 250 third graders in Scottsdale Unified. Because of the work we've done over the last 2 years, we're in third grade, fourth grade, seventh grade, and eighth grade in Scottsdale Unified. They want us to be K-12. They want us in every single grade. The conversation we had yesterday morning, and it's still pending us finding the rest of the funding, was a program that I know Dan and many of you have dreamed of for years, of building out a program like we use Colonial Williamsburg because it's what a lot of people have the notoriety of. Every school student goes to Williamsburg. We are building out a program that every single third grader will come to the preserve next year. And the next year, every single third grader will come, and the next year, every single, and in 12 years, we'll have every student in Scottsdale Unified, if nobody moves, coming through. And we want to build it out in perpetuity, that is the third grade. And people say, why third grade? It's because it's when the programs we do are built into their curriculum. We also look at what you all have been able to do in your growth. When we look at the tortoise telemetry project, we look at the bat project, we look at the butterfly project, a lot of these shifts were because we looked at key species. When we did a lot of the work in the Field Institute in its infancy, we were looking at, before we had the specialist staff, we were talking about the scientists, we looked at what would be the obvious things we want to monitor. With the pivot we're making in a lot of our work to monitor these key species, it's informing our broader work. It's informing the work that we're doing, not only here, but how can that impact other parts. I'm super excited that we will most likely have a city leadership person on our board, because the city has taken notice of what we're doing and how that could shift throughout the entire city of Scottsdale. We're becoming that strategic partner that the city is turning to on a broader spectrum. You heard me talk a little bit about the staff growth, our budget growth, our education programs. Once the Children's Festival's back, we'll be impacting 18,000 students a year from 400 a few years ago. Our contacts in the preserve blow my mind. We went from 5 years ago of the stewards being in contact with 30,000 people to this year, our stewards will have come in contact with over 100,000 people in the preserve. So for some of our folks that say, why does it seem we're shifting regionally? We're not moving the entire organization to that. Still 80% of what we do is this amazing place. But because of the exposure and opportunity that 20% does, we're never leaving the preserve. We are forever the champions and guardians of this place. But we decided to look externally and say, how can our work change others' lives? You'll see it in our strategic plan. We're doing updates on our website. And we're going to have our strategic plan up there by the end of this week. And it addresses things so far beyond the excitement that we can even talk about today. In our awareness campaign that's coming up, we're incorporating opportunities for people to be stewards of their own land. So previously it was come to the preserve and help us take care of this place. We're still going to be saying that because we know we need a lot of folks, but we're also going to be putting in our awareness campaign. Here are the things you can do in your own backyard to be a steward of your world. We're looking at these opportunities to how to make our mission impact the most amount of people instead of falling victim to what over 95% of nonprofits do, of keeping their head down and just doing their work, not because they don't want to do more, but they are such limited in resources that we're fortunate. We've got so many amazing stewards, our resources abound. They really help us grow. A couple of the other things that were just some interesting facts, as a lot of people have said in our growth, where are we going with some of this stuff? So the last study that the Bureau of Labor Statistics did showed that there were 1.6 million nonprofits in the United States. So people go, how much of a difference can we make? There's that many of them out there. One of the biggest things to remember is less than 210,000 of them are big enough to file a tax return. There are so many nonprofits out there that registered as nonprofits, so they don't have to pay tax, but they don't really generate much. Every single dog rescue, every single group out there. As you grow the size of the organization, the numbers dwindle, the numbers shrink. The organization that we were before, there was a 200,000 nonprofits in that realm. As we sit today with our current budget size, organization size, we're in a category that's less than 80,000 of nonprofits. We're in our growth life cycle. Trust me, I don't want to burn the candle at both ends as much as everybody thinks I do. We are getting to our mature life cycle. We are still in a growth life cycle. And when you see that, a lot of things happen fast. We are, what I'd like to talk with our other nonprofit leaders about is we're also a unicorn. Because of the affluence of our supporters, we were able to grow very rapidly. People had the financial opportunity to support us in ways that a lot of organizations don't have access. And that should speak volumes to what we're doing. Our donor base has grown from less than 900 people 4 years ago to almost 4,000 people. And what does that do? That's broad community support. People always ask me, well, why don't you just get one more Parsons? And while I wouldn't turn it down, Mr. Parsons and his wife are amazing. When you have broad community support, you're sustainable. Another colleague of mine has a nonprofit with 5 large funders. They lost one funder. They had to shut down 20% of their programs. By us having broader community support, especially at the levels of what everyone can do for the cup of coffee. The folks that are just able to donate $100 or $250, that is what makes an organization sustainable. We love and we're able to grow because of the people that can do more. But in our space, we not only have the affluence of our donors, we have the geography to grow at such a rapid rate. Most conservation nonprofits, and Melanie's at the back of the room, she knows what I'm talking about, and Brian too, in conservation nonprofits, because they're generally in rural areas, they don't have access to this many people. They don't have access to this, that we're very fortunate to have this. And when we see that growing broader community support, it tells us we're doing something right. It tells us that we're on the right track because people want us to do more. With that, there was one other point that had come up over the past couple of weeks that, or excuse me, two other points that I just wanted to bring up before I pop it over to Art for his update. There was a conversation that came out recently about the Conservancy's scientific approach to climate change. We are 100% a science-based organization. Climate change is real. The science proves it and backs it. But we had to have a very meaningful conversation recently out of the work we're doing with City Council and the Preserve for what they're hoping is the next Preserve tax in 2024, that we had to pay close attention to lightning rod terms. We're in a conservative area. And one of the things that came up in working with the city and as we move forward, when we refer to the work we do in science, the city refers to it as our work in preservation. And that's because science is a lightning rod term. In conservative areas, a lot of folks think science is never ending. And my scientists in the room will say, if you ask a scientist how much to study and how often, it's everything forever. And because that's gotten out in a lot of conservative circles, we talk about preservation to introduce our work to someone, and then we talk about the science. Because if we turn them off before they have the opportunity to come in the room, then we'll never have the opportunity to share the great work we're doing. That was the same thing we did with climate change. We said we aren't going to have any of our headlines include climate change, but we'll definitely have it in the dialogue. We'll have it in the conversation. But we want people to pick up our literature, to come to our site and intrigue them to want to learn more instead of not even giving them the opportunity to. The other one was what I talked about a little bit as we opened, was this initiative that I had worked with the CLT and the stewards on 3 years ago, but this concept of one conservancy. We are 100%, like I said at the beginning, the partners and collaborators between our staff and our students. When we sit down at the table and we sit down at organizations, 99% of the time we're sitting down as peers. And that's because we all recognize here, and I 100% expect it from all of our staff and stewards, that we are colleagues. We treat, and sometimes I know we get frustrated and heated and sometimes emotions get involved, but our rule of thumb is to treat the stewards as our professional peers the same way we would anyone else that we work with, and we ask the same. So when we sit in meetings and have conversations in town halls, that we're asking ourselves, if I was in my job back whenever I had that last, would I still engage in this way? So it's the concept of this one conservancy. Because we're not like most organizations that are hierarchical between our volunteers and our staff, we want to build that culture of team, that culture of together, and we're coining it one conservancy to say it is not, this is just a steward role, this is just a staff role, this is just a board role. We're all in this together. And trust me, as we hit maturity, I want to be out there doing more things with all of the stewards. I don't like hiking from my desk to the printer. I like hiking with the stewards. My capacity has been tough while we've been in this growth space. So I encourage everyone, if you ever have questions, feel free to send an email, make a phone call, set up a time to meet. Because unfortunately, a time when we haven't been able to get together, we've had rapid change and rapid growth, and we haven't had the opportunity to tell people. So if there are opportunities where people say, well, what about this? How come this? How did we grow so quick? I'm happy to grab coffee. I'm happy to grab lunch. I know from some of the folks in the room, happy hour is an opportunity too. But however we want to get together and talk, I'm happy to share where we're going. I'm happy to share why. And also even looking at that strategic plan. You can see a lot of focus. I was very fortunate to have a couple of our advisory board members tell me at our last meeting that they're so excited to see the Conservancy shifting to a major player in mission-driven conservation work. We definitely had the need to be the stewards of the McDowells and show the city the need to preserve this place. We definitely have our place in taking care of it. That's never going anywhere, but we also have a calling now to help use our amazing work to help others. So, like I said, ask questions. Feel free to send me an email, come in and talk about things. I know that since I took my time from steward recognition and today, I went a little bit longer. But with that, I'll turn it over to Art, and then I know we'll have some questions, I'm sure, coming up.
Thanks, Justin. As a follow-up to Justin's comment about education, my daughter's a special ed teacher in Scottsdale. And every now and then in fact, quite often lately, she copies me emails about the enthusiasm that all the teachers have with working with us. So it's kind of an inside, it's really nice to see that they're appreciating our help with them too. So my name's Art Rance. I'm the present CLT chair. And it's just a little history on the CLT for some of the new people out here. The CLT, or the core leadership team, was initiated back in 2010 by the Stewardship 2010 committee. And several of the people that are here in the room participated in that and really established the structure that we use as stewards now, with the programs and the core leadership team that coordinates those programs. So what is the CLT? It's a group of stewards that are program chairs and assistant chairs. And right now and plus myself, the chair, and Susan Matthews is also the vice chair. So that's a group of 20. And then we have the CEO and COO, who are sitting here to my left. That are on the team. We have city staff representatives, and we also have the Conservancy board representation there. So we meet monthly. It's been trying with COVID. In fact, I'm still getting used to looking at real people and the computer at the same time. So right now, I'm really excited. We have a really competent and energetic group of people on the CLT, and I think we're going to see some good results over the next couple of years from this great team. And it's a real mix of what I call, we used to call old time stewards. Now we call them veteran stewards. And some of the new people, actually, we have a couple of people on the CLT that are from this season's S101 classes. So that's pretty exciting to me. So what are kind of the hot topics right now that we're working on? The first thing we've done is re-energize the what we call the CLT Planning Committee. It's been around for a while, but it's an organization that's kind of within or works with the CLT that takes on projects that really don't fit a particular program. In other words, if we want to work in something in pathfinding, the pathfinding group, trailhead advisors or trailhead ambassadors. I still haven't gotten that hardwired yet. I haven't figured out the verb either for trailside ambassadoring. Anyway, no, I think I'll talk about that in a bit. So really, this group that consists of Susan Matthews, John Perreni, Gina Clark, John Ezekias, Dan Gruber, and Jackie Casey are working on a couple of initiatives. The first one is to look at our Stewart World webpage. We had a big effort put into the public-facing webpage a number of years ago, but the Stewart World really needs some work and needs to be brought up to today's standards, make it searchable, make things a lot better and easier for the stewards. We've also been working hard with executing the Conservancy Board strategic plan that, again, doesn't kind of fit into any particular program, but works with the whole CLT team. We also have another initiative that we're talking about working together, and it's a little bit of what Justin just discussed, that we're trying to make efficient communications between stewards and the staff, between the stewards and the city, so we know who to talk to and how to talk to them to get things done. And then the fourth initiative, and we have got a whole bunch of them in the closet, but these are our active ones. We're kind of, our tentative term for this is steward advancement. We really, I mean, we have a lot of people that have been in this organization a long time, and we're really trying to encourage personal growth through all the educational opportunities that we have, both in classrooms and out in the field. But we also have a goal of, but let me back up a second. S101, in listening to new stewards, the first thing they say is, this is surprising. This isn't just a bunch of renegade volunteers. Might have been what it was when we got the preserve started, but we're really a professional group. And with that professionalism, we're really looking at ongoing education and updating of the mission, the Conservancy's mission and vision for all stewards. So essentially some sort of minimal, I wouldn't call it recertification, but definitely a method to keep stewards up to date that have been around a long time. And with all the changes that we've talked about up here, we've kind of left some stewards in the dust with not knowing what's going on. So we're looking at a minimum requirements with classes, first aid, things that we think are very valuable to have competent professional stewards out in the field who are delivering a message that aligns with what our current mission and vision is with the Conservancy. So we also recently changed the name of the Pathfinders as now Trailhead Ambassadors. So we're still working on that transition. It'll work over the summer. So in summary, in my position, I would really like to have people talk to me, call me. I'm in email jail right now. So, but I have 2 emails, so you can call or email my personal one. But give me calls. I love old time phone calls. If you have any issues, ideas, especially of how to improve the Conservancy, I'd really like to know about them. Obviously, working through the program chairs of the topic that you may be talking about is the right method. But if it's something that falls outside of that direct communication, please let me know. It's a great group of stewards with a lot of initiative, and we've created a lot of new ideas and great things in recent years, and we want to keep that going. So please feel free to contact me anytime. I'm free. Thanks.
Thanks, Art. All right, I'm going to start out with a question that came in through the Gmail. Then I may go to this group, or Carlotta, could you check the chat? Would you mind checking the chat, see if anybody virtually has had a question for us? And this is for anyone up here, is what is the Conservancy's biggest challenge going to the next fiscal year?
I guess that one comes to me. Our biggest challenge is our greatest blessing. It is our growth. With growth and rapid growth, quite often, and yes, it's a 360-degree camera, so Carlotta can't hide from it. But when you're dealing with growth, you deal with a lot of challenges. Any of you that came from the change management world knows that change isn't always easy. So when we look at our greatest challenge coming in, it is throughout the organization of, do we outgrow ideas? Do we outgrow people? Do we outgrow how we do things to become more efficient? I am the first one to say that the people that founded this organization and the people that got us up to the point when I was able to join were instrumental in everything we do. We could not be who we are today without those leaders in our organization. But quite often, some of them I have conversations with, we've outgrown what they really wanted to do. Some folks say, I really wanted to just be involved in just taking care of the preserve, not really anything else. And they felt like the only opportunity was to just disengage. And one of the things that we want to do is not allow that to happen. We want to allow people to be engaged with what they want. It's one of the things we say in every S101. If something happens that you don't like, we got hundreds of opportunities. So there is a place for you with the organization. Art said one of the things the CLT is looking at is our retention. We have always focused on recruitment and recognition, but the third R of volunteering, of retention, we counted on people retaining themselves and a handful of people. Well, it's hard. So having these requirements that if someone's been a steward for 20 years, they still every year come to at least one steward event. I don't know if that's what they're going to do, but just something to keep people in the loop. So it is a big question, but the thing is, it's going to be probably our biggest struggle is while we're still in growth phase of making sure that everyone knows what's going on, that everyone comes along on the journey with us. So we will be looking at that this summer and hope that it is a smaller growing pain than it has been, but that I think will be our greatest challenge.
No, there is not, but you could encourage people to put their questions.
All right, if anyone on the Zoom call would like to submit a question, put it in the chat, and we're monitoring that. Before I go on to my next question, how about a question from all these happy faces here in the room that aren't wearing masks? It's so nice to see.
I love in-person stuff. It's so exciting. Yes.
I have a follow-up, Justin, to your interesting comments about science. To say preservation. What about our tagline, science is in?
Oh, science is definitely who we are. It's just the city council and the voters are using preservation. So we aren't particularly in what we're doing, but if everyone hears over the next 2 years as the Preserve Commission and the council goes towards this tax initiative, when you hear them talking about the preservation of the preserve, that is equivalent to the scientific research and science work we're doing. Yes, it's a government thing, so.
I wouldn't change that, because that's external facing.
Mhm.
as much as that.
When does that vote come up for the new tech? I was at an event last night with Solange Whitehead and Kathy Littlefield, and I know when it comes to nonprofits and politics, you gotta be really careful, but this is us, you know what I mean? So I'm wondering when the vote's coming and what we can do.
It's tentatively, because the government's good at pushing things back. It's tentatively November of 2024 is when they'd be looking at it. It's because the first preserve tax, the 0.2%, expires in 2025.
Right.
So the city has identified that November 2024 would be the most successful because there would be no increase to the voters because that tax would start when the 2025 one ends. So we've been working for 2 years with the Preserve Commission on what that would look like. They presented it to City Council in December. City Council gave them some follow-up questions, which Jackie and Melanie are working with the Preserve Commission on to go back to the council probably this fall. Because the conversation shifted around leading up to that City Council meeting. The City Council's #1 priority was finishing the land acquisition. At the end of that meeting, land acquisition became the lowest priority. Not that it was going to go away, but it became the lowest priority and made the top priority maintaining the preserve. Because up until this point, our contract with the city said that we are going to maintain it for the city for free forever. And that's not very sustainable. So those of you that might remember, Paul got to spend hours a day with me on this when we were doing it. But when I started, we terminated our evergreen contract with the city and entered a new contract with the city that renews every 5 years. So every 5 years, and 2023 will be our first renewal. Every 5 years, it brings the city back to the table with us to say, hey, we're currently fundraising almost $1 million just to take care of this place, plus all the money we're spending to do our work. Can you help us in any way? So if that conversation will be happening over the next year, and the nice thing, because the angle that the city is going, that the renewal will not be the full 0.2% for the preserve. A portion of it will be for the preserve and a portion for other city services. We see the advocacy as a lot lighter lift for the Conservancy Because the first two taxes where we were the primary organization advocating was in an era where picket signs on Scottsdale Road and standing out in front of Fry's got people to vote. And as we know, in digital era, and especially a conservative, politically charged era, niceties like environmental aren't very popular. So having it paired with other city services will actually complement very well for it to be successful.
What are those other city services?
The city hasn't outlined what they are yet, but it will most likely be transportation, police, fire, age. They've got a big focus on the aging population.
Okay, great.
Hopefully, we're trying to encourage them to focus on the younger population. There's a conversation traveling around the city right now about reasonably affordable housing.
Okay.
So unfortunately, we talked about preservation versus science. In government, affordable housing, everyone thinks
Homelessness.
very low, so the government term is reasonably affordable housing.
Semantics.
Yeah. But it's because of what real estate's doing in Scottsdale. Families with children
Right.
can't buy here if there's no children. Do the schools close? If the
Right.
schools close, what they're toying with models of potentially Scottsdale looking more like a Palm Springs with less youth and children and vibrance and quite it's interesting. Politics is so much fun.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Commissioner, we're back here first.
Barbara?
Barbara?
So I've been thinking about this issue of climate change because of our pillars that were purposely selected not to focus on science and education or stewardship. It comes up now regularly because not most, but half of the articles submitted for mountain lions, the authors are reporting wonderful research projects. And the research is being done because of the impact of climate change on preserve and on open spaces in general. So I'm struggling a bit with how do you be true to the pillars of science and education and to the purpose of Mountain Lions to get the word out about the wonderful things that are being done here without mentioning climate change.
And that's the fun part of being in an ever-evolving organization. When we made the decision to steer away from climate change, only in headlines, not in articles, not in subject matter, it was when our political climate was quite different. As we're shifting and becoming more highly supported by organizations and people that love we're doing that work, we're probably going to pivot that way. There's nothing to say that we might not by the end of this year change that. We are ever evolving. And what was considered a very conservative base of support a year ago is becoming very realistic. We're seeing it. We talk about it. It's one of the reasons environmental nonprofits are often funded the least. Why we're a unicorn is because it's the thing that moves the slowest. Because there's always something shiny that's getting people. If climate change used to be a horrible word, because people say, no, it's not. I just turn on my air conditioner. And now, because it's so dramatic, I can definitely see us shifting more in that direction because Dr. Schlosser, who's on our board, I follow his work all the time. And it's so fascinating, the science of what we do. Him and I had a very good conversation about what's happening in our ecosystem right now. Our ecosystem is out of balance. It's been proven over millions of years that when something's out of balance, the ecosystem shifts from one extreme to another. It's an attempt to self-correct. So if we remember the 2 feet of snow up on Dynamite, I remember it vividly because when I drove past, all of the little reflective pot dots were in the drainage on the side of the road because the city only had giant road graders to plow snow. They had no snowplows. And then I think of the Deck Park Tunnel closing from 30 feet of flooding to then 50 days of over 115. This ecosystem effect is proven to happen because the planet and the ecosystems self-corrected. And it will continue going to further extremes until it eradicates the problem. And science is proving that's us. So, great point, and definitely worth consideration very soon because it is our reality.
And I would just add to that, the reason we kind of took the position that we didn't want it in headlines is because we are trying to be an inclusive organization. However, any of us feel individually, there are around 25% of people that live in this city that don't believe in climate change. So if we put it in a headline and we put it in the very first words, have we got 25% of people who aren't going to read any further? They're just going to throw it away. Is it better to keep it out of the headline, out of the title, but still put the facts out there and still talk about climate change? Do we have a hope of helping those people understand that science proves there's climate change? So that's the kind of thought process we've been going through. But as Justin said, it's something we're continually looking at. And Brian and I had a great conversation about this the other day. Do we better spend our time trying to get to those people who currently don't believe in it? Or do we better spend our time acting and doing what we can do to help climate change? And I don't think any of us know the answer to that, but I do think it's an important dialogue. I would hate to do something that excludes 25% of people.
I'm gonna come back to your question. We're gonna go to our Zoom guest.
Yes,
Our
and
online viewers.
yes, and maybe this was covered in the very beginning, but this online person would like to know the other panelists, if they would introduce themselves and describe a little bit about what you do. Thank you.
So they know who I am. They better know who I am.
Yes, so we can start, I guess, with
Sure.
Miss Jackie.
So Jackie Casey, I'm Chief Operating Officer. My role is very much to run the inside piece of the organization. So finance, HR, risk, office, all of those kind of pieces. And also I'm the primary contact for many of the stewards and certainly the CLT.
Mhm.
Go ahead.
I think you did.
Yeah, I introduced
You did.
myself somewhere.
All right, I'm Gary Shalla. I'm your new Chief Development Officer. My team is responsible for development and fundraising, events, marketing, communications, outward-facing pieces, inward-facing pieces, website, social media. So we are the voice and the fundraising machine behind the Conservancy's efforts.
Yes, thank you.
And I will say, well, most people I think know what I do. Other than just primarily leading the organization, a lot of my focus now that we've built out my leadership team has focused on our proactive work on where are we going. So before we had been able to grow out the team, a lot of my work was still in the day-to-day operations and being reactive to the scenarios of the organization. So the best example that I give is Gary and his team are fundraising for the campaign this year. I'm fundraising for next year and the year after that. I'm working with our board, our elected officials. I've recently, in my time that I've had, been meeting with our gubernatorial candidates who might be our next governor, because we're getting on their radar. We're on Governor Ducey's radar because 2 years ago when we got our service enterprise designation, his office managed that. One of the things that a lot of people don't realize, the Nature Conservancy, Patrick, their previous CEO, was often in Washington lobbying on behalf of environmental causes. I'm not heading to Washington, but if we can at our state level start to advocate for some of our work, again, a third of our city is open space. We're fortunate that the city focuses a lot on it, but they need the state's help too.
Now, Rick, thank you.
My question actually is a suggestion, and it's nothing like anything you've been talking about. This is a very specific old people's concern for what occurs every weekend at pretty much every trailhead. I lead a group of about 20, 30 old people who have been hiking in the preserve for like 15 years. And every Sunday we hike, and every trailhead we go to, pretty much, we run into loads and loads, herds of bikes. And because of that, we find ourselves stopping every 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, but we can't walk very long without having to stop. And for a couple of years, every time I go, I talk to one of the stewards there. I used to be a steward, I may still be a steward, I'm not sure. But the comment always is, well, who's going to enforce it if we designate a trail, one trail, for hikers on weekends? Who's going to enforce it? And I understand their concerns, because that's supposedly, that would be their job. However, if you don't have a rule, no one's going to follow it, because it doesn't exist. So my thinking was, and human nature being, most people would follow rules. So if you actually designated a trail on a Saturday and a Sunday, hikers only, I'm going to guess 80% of the bikers would say, oh, that's not for us. And the other 20%, as I tell my partners, I have hiking sticks, so when they come by, I just put my,
Again,
I wouldn't do that.
If I can,
Sure.
this is a city issue.
Mhm.
This is not a conservancy issue. We have no control over this. We can make the same suggestion at the same level you are, but I would suggest you take this to the city.
Okay,
Yeah,
how?
a lot of.
I'm ready.
Yeah, a lot of our folks, and one of the things that we encourage, because we work very closely with preserve staff. But as citizens, as residents, if we want to change rules in the preserve, it goes a lot further for you all to reach out directly than through us as a conduit. And I won't say that us supporting it is always helpful, because if one person emails the council and then we say, absolutely, this is what you need to do, it carries more weight when the citizens come. I can say, because we've been addressing it with the heat. Everyone keeps asking, well, why won't the city close certain trails like Phoenix is doing? And Scottsdale is very conservative. They will not put a rule in that they can't enforce. So they won't do the closure for heat because they know they don't have the resources to enforce it. But we have been making huge strides with the city over the last couple of years of transitioning to proactive looks. So the first one being this preserve tax for maintaining. Another one being the leashes. We got enough people saying there are so many dogs off leash. The city of Scottsdale entered into an intergovernmental agreement with Maricopa County 2 years ago that on the weekends to have animal control officers on. So the city is making proactive advances. This summer, they're doing their first mass invasives removal by a contractor coming in. We're so excited that the city is partnering with us on being proactive, but they have made it very clear that they aren't interested in rules they can't strictly enforce because it's so big. The reason Phoenix has only done it at 2 parks is because they're small enough, and the city of Phoenix has 50 park rangers. If they close 2 parks, which is what they're doing, they can deploy those 50 to 2 tiny parks versus the city who has 4.85 preserve staff and shared police to try and do what, 50 openings to the preserve? How many other access points? So we definitely encourage you to reach out, but that's been their angle in the past.
And that there was a movement with the electric bikes last year, and the community, not us, but the community reached out, and that got pretty much shot down. So there is power in your
Numbers, okay.
All right, I'm gonna combine a couple of questions. One that we've had before is what's the Conservancy's biggest challenge going into next fiscal year? Is there a plan to promote the Conservancy to the greater community? Why don't my neighbors know about the Conservancy? And lastly, why are we not working with the huge tourism industry in Scottsdale? And I'm the facilitator asking myself the questions. Most of you in the room have met me, don't really know me. Many people on the Zoom call don't know me, but I've been here for 90 days. We've been working really hard. I've got an amazing professional group behind me. Carlotta and Tyler and Sue, Robin in the back. We're all working really hard. You've gone through 2 years of COVID. 2 years where I couldn't come and have a cup of coffee with you, where I couldn't sit down and break bread with you, where I couldn't have a drink some night with a steward friend and other people who we might pull into our group. And it's been really hard. You've also gone through some changes because with that COVID came really a lot of stress. It's hard to be in a development position, to be in a marketing position, to be in an events position when you can't do 90% of your work. And so what we've done over the past 90 days is really work hard. You're going to see in the next 30 days a comprehensive development plan, a comprehensive marketing plan, a comprehensive communications plan that fit together. And they all fit together with a strategic plan. So that, as I tell my staff, and I've talked to staff here about, we're all looking at the same point on the horizon. We're all going to that same point on the horizon. So what you're going to see over the next year from this group, from this team, is really a lot of that outreach that you've been questioning. We really want to start to try to get engaged. I'm working with one of your stewards on redeveloping the HOA communication strategy. Maybe we can't do everyone, but maybe this year we'll do one. We'll talk to each person at HOA about how they can improve their backyard, how they can treat an animal when it comes into their yard off the reserve, what they can do to be good stewards and good neighbors of the preserve. We're also engaged with, we got a very nice grant from Arizona Tourism Board. I don't have that right, Office of Tourism, Arizona Office of Tourism, getting all these new acronyms together as I moved here. It's a grant around ecotourism. It's amazing. It is exactly what we need at exactly the right time. You're right, we're not engaging the hospitality industry, the restaurant industry, all those different pieces that could be advocates for us that could be using it. Along with that, we, with Experience Scottsdale, have applied for a grant opportunity where their subcategory Exceptionally Scottsdale.
Experiential.
There we go.
Experiential Scottsdale.
They, why they keep it so close to a word is confusing to us old guys. But what this program will do is it will give us all the tools over a 6-month period to be a true representative of Scottsdale, to have Scottsdale promoting us in all their educational, all their travel, all their promotional events as one of the leaders in the community. It will also then dovetail into this tourism grant so that we can use one to leverage the other. And so you're going to see some really great things, I think, for next year in what we do in guided hikes, in new people coming to the reserve, and us engaging with communities around the country who come and we can guide them through an experience that really leaves them awestruck and makes them advocates for us for that next group that comes from Sacramento or from Chicago or from Boston to do the same experience or have the same experience. So all these things are part of that new communications, that new outreach, that new plan to really be proactive. And only 8%, did I get that right, of Scottsdale residents use the preserve?
Well, it's some highly controversial data, but there is a data company that shared with us the last 3 years of users of the preserve. Yes, it's very big brother. Every time you update your iPhone and you say accept all terms and you don't read them all, the only time they can't count you is if you have tracking turned off or you don't take your phone with you. Otherwise, when you enter the preserve, it pings this global data service. And last year, 10% of the preserve users were residents, 90% were tourists. And it's an opportunity that Gary and I were talking about with the city of how amazing would it be if when someone comes here, they don't just use the preserve for recreation and then go home. What if they learn something that they can take home with them? that we're not doing conservation in Boston or Sacramento, but it gives them the ear or the eye to want to be more conservation centric where they live. That would be a great touchstone for our city to start to develop, of people are coming here to learn. The data, I was interviewed a couple weeks ago by one of Scottsdale's contractors they hired out of Canada that specifically works in ecotourism. And they said the tourism trend coming out of COVID is people want to do experiences they can't do at home. They want to do something that they learn and enriches them, not just, and don't get me wrong, I want to go land on a beach and not learn anything. But typically the tourism trend, they want to go somewhere, do something they can't do at home and learn about something to take home with them. So it's a huge opportunity for us if truly 90% of the folks that are coming there don't live here. Just so everyone knows, the year before last, 20% of the users were residents. But the year before, they had 750,000 visits. Last year, they had 1.2 million. So if a lot of the folks were from, and they consider a tourist outside, their phone lives outside of Arizona. So.
Do they sort of put a number on that? Because at the end of the day, there's a huge increase in visitors. The numbers I see around the value of the preserve is often the value of the land, which is sort of academic, fine. But the value that it's bringing to Scottsdale, there are a lot of people, you talk to them on the trails, who come here because they want to go in the preserve. So when the city evaluates their investment in the preserve, and do they put an idea of what that really brings in tourist revenue?
Believe it or not, the city has not done an economic impact study of the preserve. They count on Experience Scottsdale to give them the numbers. And Experience Scottsdale is where this data came from, because they use that data to say, okay, this is how many heads in beds, as they call it. But the preserve itself, one of the meaningful conversations we've been having with the city is, we all know by the time the second tax expires, the city will have spent between 2.4 and probably 2.8 billion dollars on it. But because of the value of the land, the mayor said it in open council on the minutes, so I can say it, but on the city's books, the preserve is almost $7 billion because they value the land. And that's the controversial part, because if it's preserved, is there any value? But they haven't looked at the economic impact. Jackie and I have talked about it for a couple of years, how much we would love to do one. Because at my previous organization, we had a 2-day event that brought in 30,000 people, and we had so much headache with the city because they saw it as a nuisance. And then we had ASU do an economic impact study, and those 2 days brought in $7 million in economic impact.
gonna
And the
say,
city
that's a
then
lifetime
started
benefit.
promoting it. So, unfortunately, governments are so reliant on being reactive. Probably we would want to move down that road, but it's a great idea.
Any questions here?
The only other thing I wanted to throw in there is we have been actively recruiting for tourism representation on our board, because we recognize how important it is. But as everyone can imagine, in COVID, everyone in tourism lost their jobs. I literally met with someone yesterday who's at the Westin across the street here, well, across the street from Rolo. And they were the only resort in the valley that stayed open through COVID. And their largest staff was landscaping. And if you think of the proportion of restaurant versus housekeeping versus, if landscaping was the biggest department, it hit everybody super hard. As well during, I think it was right before COVID, and you can fact check me on this because I don't know exactly, but when Marriott bought Starwood, it shifted a lot in the valley because Starwood had such a huge presence. So we're actively trying to engage in tourism because we recognize, I scream it from the rooftops, and sometimes the preservation people don't like that I scream it, but tourism is why the preserve is possible. We talk about all the time that it's the largest urban preserve in North America for one reason only, is because no other city is crazy enough to preserve that much of itself. Because cities have to depend on land for property taxes. If it's a business on that land, sales taxes. But the city's finance department says 40% of the tax revenue in Scottsdale comes from tourism. So because of tourism, this place exists. And it's the other fascinating fact, which it gets contentious with me and some folks, is the city's tax is 1.75%. Everyone knows they pay 8.1 on that receipt. That includes state and county. So 1.75% is the city's sales tax. The preserve tax is 0.35% of that. 20% of the taxes paid in Scottsdale go to buying land. That other 80% is for everything else in the city. So that's why this upcoming vote is so instrumental, because the city is going to give the preserve a portion, and they're going to hopefully get the rest for other city services. When I moved here, Scottsdale had a policy that potholes had to be filled within 24 hours of them being reported. How long has it been since that's happened? So it's good times.
The question here, it was say is, will the plans that you had mentioned, along with the strategic plan, when will they be, what are the plans for them being published or available?
So the strategic plan is already on Stewart World.
Strategic plan will be on the website within the next week. I would guess I would have that person contact me directly. If they want to read through the almost 30 pages of different documents, I'm happy to go through that with them. The plans that we're developing are the guideposts that we're using internally, and they're the goals and tactics that we're going to use to get to each one of those things. So I'd be happy to sit down with that person or a group of individuals, maybe a group of stewards who want, who I'm going to reach out to in the coming months anyway, to be part of a development committee. I'd love to have that person contact me and be part of that committee, because it's quite in depth, and to publish it won't really make sense to a lot of people. It'd be a lot of pages where you go, I don't get it.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to do that.
And publishing it, you all remember from your work days, trade secrets out on the internet aren't really a good thing. So aside of the business, we're happy, and I'm excited that we're forming a steward development committee, because we want more voices at the table and more people helping us develop it. But with the odds of it being on our website are very slim.
So I'm gonna answer one more question now, because we're down into the less glamorous questions, as you might say, but there was a question I want to address, because it did come in fairly early. You talked about grants and donations, and it was a series of bullet points about really what is the purpose of the money, what are the activities, what's the time frame for expenditures of the money, all those different kinds of things. So for those of you who aren't familiar with grants and or donations when they're specific to a project, each grant or each request that we may give to a specific donor for a specific project, it has a specific purpose. And so we're really focusing that grant or that request on that specific purpose: education, science, whether it's general funding, whether it's expansion of a program. We have that in that request. Each grant will have its own, or each request of a donor will have its own specific metrics, so that we will outline in advance what those metrics are. Here's what we're going to do with your money. Here's what we want to try to achieve. Here's what we think we can do with this grant. The other thing with a grant is we have these lofty goals, sometimes lofty goals. We have goals that we're really pushing ourselves for, or we come to a point in a grant where we say, oh, I never thought about that. That's really going to sidetrack us. At that point, the biggest thing that we do is go back to the funder, we go back to the grant, and we say, we didn't see this coming. Did you see it coming? And they're like, we didn't see it coming either. Okay, how do we find a solution? How do we tack to a different point? How do we re-massage this grant or this donation so that we can achieve, or that we can work towards getting that piece? The timing on getting the money, each grant or each donation is specific to that request or donation. In the case of this tourist grant, the money came up front. We have 2 years to spend it. We have reports every quarter or every 6 months that we must do to get to them, so that They know we're using the money right. And at the end, there's always a report that captures everything about that grant or that donation that was specific or restricted. And so there's a very definite outline, timeframe, expenditures, and metric. The final question on this was a little bit like the question that came from the Zoom audience was, do you publish these results? And yes and no. You'll see the results in the annual report. You'll see them in the fast facts. You may see them in some of the articles, either in Mountain Lions, as you see a scientific project come to fruition, or as we see an education season come to a close. You'll see those in those specific ways. The reports to the funders, if you have a specific request of a report that we give to a funder, please come to me, we can talk about it. But that's really a contract between the funder or the grantor and the conservancy. It's not really public knowledge. The other thing is that we want to maintain that relationship with that funder or that grantor. And so with those results, what we're trying to do is deepen that relationship. And by deepening that relationship, then we can say, we'd like to, now that we've got to this level, help us get to this level. And so you're continually renewing that. So I hope they're on the Zoom call. I hope that answered their question about grants and donations. I'm going to give each panelist, if they like it, 1 minute, just to kind of summarize.
It's impossible.
Because we do want to be conscious of your time and of your time. So I'll start with Jackie, if you'd like to.
Sure. So I mean, today was very much about us answering your questions. So I'm going to use my 1 minute to make a plug for something that Education have coming up on April the 27th. So they've been out taking expedition days on the road to schools. And I got to meet the education team the other day when they came back in, and they'd just taken 90 third graders through ecology Jenga. And they're telling them the story, and the kids, as the story goes on, are having to pull pieces out. And when it was obvious Jenga was going to collapse, Jen sitting right in front of me, the kids went up and hugged this stuff. And this is what we talk about, the way kids are learning nowadays. So April 27th, they're going to clear this room, and we're going to bring all the games and exercises that they do with kids. So that's my 1 minute. Come join them. It's on Better Impact.
I just want to reiterate what I said about contacting me and getting in touch with ideas, because, you know, one of the exciting parts of being in this position in the Conservancy is I like to look for new and efficient ways of doing things. In my professional time, I always spent time in the complications conferences because I didn't want to make the same mistakes twice. So please, you know, keep in touch with me if you have ideas, thoughts, anything that we can make this whole organization better. Please let me know. Thanks.
I just want to thank you. I became a steward the way that you became a steward. I didn't take my staff pass and get a free ride. And I can't tell you the amazing time I had becoming a steward, and I want to continue to learn more. I really enjoyed my time with the leadership hike. It really gave me some great insights. I've been loving my legacy hikes. You know, we talk about the One Conservancy. I wrote an article that has not been published, but I called it One Ecosystem. Same concept. We are one conservancy. We are one ecosystem. We're self-dependent. And so thank you for accepting some of my new ideas like this. If you like chocolate, or your significant other likes chocolate, please go online. This chocolate's unbelievable. It is shipped frozen. It will come frozen despite it being 100 at the end of the week. We're trying to find new ways and new exciting ways to engage and to find resources and to find advocates for us. So thank you for this, and hope you enjoyed it. I'll let Justin finish.
Yes, so thank you all for joining us in person and on Zoom. I'm really bad at looking at both. The couple of things I wanted to share just to tag on to what Gary had said, because it brought up very interesting question because it came up at our board meeting when we were presenting the budget. About a third of our staff is grant funded. So when people look at, we've also grown the team, we went out and found funders specifically to support those roles. So when we saw the growth, a lot of it was because of the growth that we strategically went out and looked to work in projects. Also, as Gary said, those annual reports that we send to our funders move mountains. That annual report is what opened the door to move Parsons from there to over doubling their gift. So with those, if people want to come in, you guys are experts from your fields of the day. We're always looking for help. That's why we talk about this partnership. But I just wanted to go ahead and close because I found it very important with a lot of the funders that I talked to, that optically, when people are looking at an organization in its growth phase, it's like, okay, are they spending it before it comes in? Like, how are we growing so fast? And we have been very intentional in managing our finances to make sure we don't hit a downturn again. So one of the things that we've been doing in the background as we've been growing and spending more money is also building our reserves. We have each year been building out our reserves more and more. Unfortunately, it was depleted by the last downturn. But our goal within the next few years is to have 6 months of operating reserves there for an emergency, so that we don't have to say we've got to cut if something goes down. We're strategically working with the city to help us fund our baseline services. We're not asking them to fund half of our budget like we were 5 years ago. We're asking them to fund the portion of our budget that maintains a baseline level of service to take care of the preserve for as long as we can. So if we hit another downturn, resources don't have to move away from the place where we got our roots and still thrive today. Additionally, we've been strategic in building out our business opportunities. As I said, when I came on board, we had a $50,000 credit line. As we sit today, we have an unutilized $300,000 credit line. We also have an access to another $100,000 emergency line if we need to. So we haven't just been bringing it in and putting it right back out there. We've been very strategic in how we operate the business to make sure that it's sustainable long past when I'm here. And I'm not planning on going anywhere, but that we're setting the business up for success to deliver its mission far beyond today. So one of the things that I like to look at it is 30 years ago, someone planted the seed that is now the Conservancy. As we sit today, that seed has germinated and grown into a tree. And what we're working on today is in 30 years, seeing that tree become a forest. So really seeing how we are strategically looking as the organization moves forward, not just being reactive, but in a growth phase, a lot of the times you have to be reactive because it's so rapid. So as Gary said, Jackie said, Art said, feel free to reach out if you ever need anything. I might be a little hard to pin down, but it's because I talk longer in my meetings than I should, so I have longer meetings. But thank you everyone for joining us on Zoom. Thank you for joining us in person. And we hope you have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.